Before we get things started, I wanted to get out my list of sponsors. Trek Bicycles is here and has been one of the sponsors, and of course, the Gainesville Cycling Club was gracious enough to allow us to put this on with their event. We'll see a lot of those riders tonight and over the next couple of days. The city of Gainesville has been really helpful in helping us get things done. We appreciate the support that they have given. And then, of course, the Gainesville Area Chamber of Commerce and the Gainesville Citizens Active Transportation Organization and the Gainesville Community Redevelopment Agency. The Bob Graham Center for Public Service at the University of Florida has also been one of our supporters. The Florida Bicycle Association, and of course, Bike Florida and Share the Road. And every time you buy one of these plates and put this plate on your car, of course the big one, you help support things like this event. There are many other things that we do, but this is something that plate helps accomplish. There are a couple of other folks to thank who made some contributions for the Fallen Cyclist Memorial. The law office of C. David Coffey, Chin Moore and Associates, Barrington's Adventure Outfitters, Brazington, sorry, and San Feliska section of the Florida Planners American Planning Association. Try to figure out how to say that one. So all those folks made that happen, and of course Ron and his team really did a lot of work to make all of this come off this morning. Now, if I could introduce the Mayor of Gainesville, Mr. Ed Bradley. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a great turnout for this event. It's a great pleasure to be here. One of the perks of being mayor is I get to give a lot of welcome addresses and speeches where everyone else does all the heavy lifting, and I just get to come in, grab a cup of coffee, and take a bow. So, but I will say this, if you're, I want to recognize some of my colleagues, Commissioner Randy Wells here, and I saw Commissioner Craig Carter in the back, and and there's Commissioner Helen Warren. And, you know, we had a regular meeting last Thursday, and we did pass a resolution for fantastic weather this weekend. So if you're enjoying it, you're welcome. We also have some of my former city commissioners and colleagues, Commissioner Susan Botcher, and I saw Commissioner Warren Nielsen and Commissioner Thomas Hawkins. I hope I didn't leave out anyone, but the city commission has certainly embraced this effort and embraced this over the years. I've known Ron Cunningham, who's founded this for many years as the editorial writer, of course, for the Gainesville Sun, and even where we disagreed, he's always generous and making sure all viewpoints were published, and I thought that's very commendable. So we're very grateful that you're doing this event here in Gainesville. We think Gainesville is a great city for such an event where these ideas of economic impact and safety are explored and then put into practice. And this is your second event, and so we hope there are, of course, many, many more, and we hope, of course, though, it stays right here in Gainesville. How many of you are not from Gainesville that you drove in for this event? That's wonderful. That is absolutely wonderful. I would be remiss in my duties if I didn't say spend lots of money while you're here and enjoy our many fine restaurants and other events, other things we have going on. But anyway, y'all got a lot to do today, so I'll sum up, or I'll just go ahead and conclude. Thank you for coming out. Thank you for being a part of this event here in Gainesville. And Ron, thank you for your leadership in getting this started.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Now, our Master of Ceremonies for this morning will be City Commissioner Randy Wells.
Well, I guess you can keep that. I think I've got my hands free so I can gesticulate wildly. I want to say welcome and thank you all for being here. I can't tell you how excited all of us have been to organize for this day, and the fact that it coordinated so beautifully with the Gainesville Cycling Festival, and I hope many of you will be getting your bike out and going for a ride tomorrow morning. Of course, Ron Cunningham has been absolutely central to the success of this event, and we really hope this to be eventually a regular statewide event that travels the state and builds constituency and argument for the great things that cycling And bike cycling, walking and cycling have to contribute to the well-being of our state. I'm particularly honored to have the opportunity to MC this morning session because many of us for years have recognized the enormous economic value that cycling and walking have in our communities. And in fact, that is really becoming a national conversation. We have great leadership at the federal level. We have great leadership at the state level. And I say, when I talk to my friends, I'm originally from Colorado, but I'm very proud and honored to be your representative here in the city of Gainesville because I say that what we do here in Florida not only can impact 19 or 20 million folks that live here in this state, the 100 million plus that visit this state every year, but we can really help set the agenda for the entire country. And I ask each of you to think today as we're discussing the pros and the cons of what we're doing here in cycling, and particularly the economic impact, think about how this can impact your local community, but more importantly, set the agenda for this state. And this is really just the second celebration of cycling. We want this to end up being 20, 30, 40 of these, and over time, we're going to have an enormous change in policy and economic impact in our state. So with that, I'm going to really step aside and welcome the first of our speakers to the center podium here. We are so honored to be graced with the visit by Representative Halsey Beshears, representing District 7, am I right? Which represents this incredible, beautiful part of the state from Tallahassee down to the coastal areas, some of the rural areas in the Panhandle, just a gorgeous part of the state. Family that's been involved in, agriculture in our community for generations. But he, and I won't steal any of his thunder, but he has gotten into a whole nother economic line of work thanks to cycling, and he'll, I'm sure, share some of that here. If none of you tell anyone, I think you're going to hear a really great story. And he has been absolutely central to bringing a bipartisan cut on what the economic impact and value of cycling is for our state. And so with that, I'm going to welcome Halsey Beshears. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Randy, thank you very much for the kind introduction. He made all that up. I'm really not that great a guy. And Ron, thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. You know, I will say this real quick. When Ron called me about this, I was so excited because I thought he called me as a cyclist. And I get to come down here and talk about bicycles or something. And he goes, no, we really want a legislative perspective. And I went, oh, okay. My name's Halsey Beshears. I'm from Monticello, Florida, which is east of Tallahassee. And I represent House District 7, which is 10 counties. It's the largest district in the state. I have 9 full counties and a piece of Leon County, a piece of Tallahassee. So I got elected 2 years ago, just got reelected this year. It's been an honor to serve, I tell you what. But anyway, with that being said, I tried to think about what I could talk about for 25 minutes. And by the way, I don't have 25 minutes prepared. I can't do 25 minutes on my best day without getting into dirty jokes. And there's too many females around here to start that. So I've got about 10 minutes, and basically I'm just going to give you some thoughts and some perspectives. The 3 things I'd really like to touch on are, kind of what's happened politically in terms of direct cycling here this past year from session. Secondly, I'd like to talk about how we can change the state of Florida, one city and town at a time. And third, I'll leave you with a little bit of my ideas where I'd like to see Florida go in the next 10 years. So first of all, to talk about cycling politically, and the reason I want to bring this up is important. The problem with the state and cycling, the problem with the state and policy is they tend to move at glacial speed when they want to, or a lot of the time. And then the other half of the time, they'll move lightning quick. So being in that process can be very, very frustrating. And the reason is you have good policy that is sacrificed at the expense of negotiations or bad policy. There's a lot of great things that can happen, but in the legislative process, it just gets bogged down. I can't speak to the county side of it, but representing 9 full counties, I can tell you it's pretty similar. You know, at the end of the day, you have to learn to get along. And this last session, we had 3 really important pieces that affect the whole state of Florida. 3 things that happened. 2 were budget items and 1 was a law. Real briefly, the first budget item was the coast-to-coast trail that goes from the west coast to the east coast. If you're from Florida, then you know what I'm talking about. It took 2 years to get it on the line item. It's 275 miles. It basically connects what bike trails are there. It goes all the way across from St. Pete to over to the Canaveral. The second budget item was a BMX park, training park in Oviedo, Florida. And Oldsmar BMX worked the legislative process really hard to try and get this in there. And the reason this is important, because they're trying to get an Olympic certified center here. And guess what? BMX is going to be an Olympic sport. The third part was a piece of legislation that passed, and I'm sure some of you have heard about. It's called the Aaron Cohen Life Protection Act. And what this was teeth in a hit-and-run accident that ended up as a murder for a pedestrian or a person on a cyclist. A guy could hit a guy on a bike and drive off and only get 6 months. The law is actually asking for more, and they settled on 4 years minimum mandatory if there's a hit and run for a cyclist. Now, the bad part about this is, and this is unfortunate I say this, for that act, for that law now to get any real recognition, something bad's going to happen. And I hate to say that, but the media will have to pick it up. And the reason I say that, for non-cyclist motorists, for them to be cognizant every day of bicyclists on the road, something like that's going to have to be driven into their head, some kind of life-changing event. And that's terrible, but that's the nature of who we are in the society we are today. Driving over here, I had a guy ride with me. He pulled right in front of a cyclist. Didn't even see him. Just glaringly obvious, but in his mind, a young man, just didn't see him. So that's the reason I bring that up. That's important. Now, why all three of these things are important, though, some would call the budget items turkeys. And you may say they are. But the reason they're important is the state has recognized now cycling is becoming a very important part of this, because cities and townships and communities are recognizing what it brings to the community. And so for the state to acknowledge that for these three small things is a very, very big deal. That bodes well for anybody in the cycling industry, anybody that bikes, and anybody who wants to change their lives. The second part, it kind of dovetails into from my first part, how we can change the cities and towns one thing at a time. All three of those things that happen, the two budget items in the law, were a result of really one person or a very small group. You know, I tell you what, and I'll try not to be a rah-rah cheerleader. I really thought that's what Ron wanted me down here to be, and now I'm going to be a rah-rah cheerleader, because I truly believe this from the bottom of my heart. One person can make a difference. One person can show up and change the law. One person can get $20 million on the state budget, but you got to believe it. You got to want to do it. There's some epiphany that maybe happens with all these people. But the point is, they went in there and they made a difference. And that's at a state level. This isn't micro, this is macro. And so we can do this as a community and as people, as everyone in here is an advocate of cycling, we can do this one small city at a time. Now, let me be realistic here. I understand we can't pave hundreds of roads of bike lanes and create new bike lanes and have all this great stuff that we like, because guess what? It costs money. And it costs millions of dollars. How did Portland go from being a 1.5% to 6% of its community commuting in 6 years, 2002 to 2008? They didn't pave 100 miles of roads. They didn't create 100 miles of bike lanes. And actually, in 8 years' time, they only created 26 new miles of bike lanes. That's it. But they had a friendly city commission. They agreed as a community that they wanted to make that difference. And they didn't spend a whole lot of money. But they made people think about it different. They had staff that engaged and embraced the ideal change. They educated their consumers one person at a time. They did small pilot projects throughout the city. They painted bike lanes. They were the first one to put in bike boxes. All that stuff does cost money, but it is attainable. We can do that. The third thing that I'll drum into is kind of where I'd like to see Florida go in the next 10 years. And it's a little bit of my own personal vision. And what Randy talked about is I've gotten into the cycling business here full time about 3.5 years ago. I was in the nursery business with my family. I have 2 brothers and a father, and we're glorified farmers. We grow container trees and shrubs. Have about 150 employees there in Monticello. And I finally left that family business after 15 years to go into the cycling business full time. You may say, why? Again, let's just say I've had my own epiphany. Life is short. We don't have much time here. Let's enjoy and do what we like. and let's try and make a difference. And it's always been my belief that anything I would do, I would just try and leave this place a little bit better than I found it. Growing trees and shrubs, I genuinely believe that. We were growing clean air machines. We were growing carbon dioxide processors. We weren't growing trees. And in the bicycling business, I have two great partners that help us run our two stores. We have one in Jacksonville, one in Tallahassee. And you know what? We had a branding meeting 2 days ago. We were going through and we're trying to figure out what our next direction is. And the lady sat there and asked us, what's y'all's vision? What's your big macro vision? And she let the two guys go first. And I sat there and almost cried because and I mean that because they were so spot on and so big. It's not always about making money, and money does make it easier, but it truly isn't going to make you happier. It's about leaving this place a little better than we found it. We're going to do everything we can to try and make this place a little bit better. You see, in our eyes, we have the belief that there are two great life-changing moments in a kid's life, and especially in Florida right here. One of them is when you first ride a bike, and one of them is when you first learn how to swim. And not everybody gets to do both of them, I realize that, but they're two pretty life-changing events that as a kid, I still remember both. I still remember the first bike I rode in my parents' driveway, this old orange Huffy with a big old banana seat. I remember falling and almost cracking my head, and we didn't wear helmets. And I'm a lot funnier than I think I am, by the way, so forgive me. But I remember that. And I remember the first time I swam, and so we believe that we can create those memories in children. We believe that we can reach out to their parents and teach them by setting a good example and teaching those kids to have those great memories and perhaps getting them to over-romanticize those memories as they get older. They'll be stewards of cycling. They'll be advocates of cycling. They'll continue to look for cities that embrace cycling. We can start right now in the next 10 years with the kids today and the parents that are there and move forward and try and create these small cycling communities. Now, I will say it's a little ambitious to say that, I want Florida to be the greatest state in the country in terms of cycling, and that's a pretty hefty goal. And I realize that, but it takes time. It takes 20 years. It does. And you can say that we don't have enough time or that's too much time, but I will tell you the one thing we got is time. That's all we have, every one of us. And we all got the same exact amount in every day. So if I can leave one town changed, if I can leave my little small town, Monticello or Tallahassee changed, and I can use the legislature to help embrace this and help them go, hey, we do need to make a change in terms of health, because we all know the benefits way past that. We all know about it being a healthier lifestyle. We all know about it creating a better environment. We know about it always creating a stronger community. We know about it brings families together as you get outside to do things. All of that stuff we know, but we have to start trying right now. I really was going to get emotional on you, so I'm going to stop right now. At the end of the day, you can make a difference. The reason that I ended up running for the office was because of a lady right here in Gainesville. It's a long story, but at the end of the day, you know what she said is, the world is run by the people who show up. And that's pretty heavy. But at the end of the day, you can make a difference if you show up. You got to want to show up. And so I'll challenge every one of you right here today. Get out of here, wherever you live, and go out and take one brand new person on a ride, take one brand new parent in a bike shop, and get them to overcome that mystique and that nervousness they get to go in there and start all over. Get them to remember that one memory, and I think you'll find you may create a person for life that'll enjoy cycling. So anyway, thanks for the opportunity to have me here. It truly is a pleasure and an honor. If you ever get into Tallahassee, I'm the only Halls of Beshears in the whole state. I don't know if that's good or bad, but I'm easy to find, particularly in my little small hometown. So yeah, we'll take a couple questions.
Awesome, yeah, please.
I didn't catch the town that you were talking about that had such an impact with very little added bike lanes. What town were you?
That was Portland, Oregon. Yeah, in 2002, Seattle I think, was the greatest state, or the biggest state in the country. And Andrew can maybe speak to this too, being from Trek, and I knew he touches on Florida, but Seattle was one of the best cycling cities in the country at about 1.5% more or less of its population. And don't quote me on the exact percentages, but I think it was about 1.5%. Portland was at about 1.1, 1.2. And in 6 years, they had this huge explosion that almost 7% of the population turned to commuting. And they were like, well, how is that? Was there a big Gas prices went up, yes, but the city sat down and finally said, you know what, we're going to figure this out. And they did that through pilot projects of painting bike lanes, squeezing down roads, because guess what, the wider the roads are, the faster people drive. They did all this small stuff, and they embraced it as a community. And the biggest thing they did was they actually hammered on their staff. They hammered on the institutional people that were running the government and said, man, look, you guys got to help embrace this because you're the ones going to help implement this change. Politicians come and go, and some of that staff, they stay there. So if you don't get them to embrace it, then you'll never get it to run. But it was Portland, Oregon. They had this huge explosion. Yes, sir.
Mr. Beshears, I appreciate your comments. Thank you for what you do for cycling. I'm Stephen McKinney-Steck from Oviedo, Florida. As a legislator, and to paraphrase the comment that you made, that agendas are created by those who show up, we have showed up. What 3 specific issues would you say the cycling community needs to help with you as a member of the legislature to further advance the agenda of the cycling in Florida? 3 things.
3 things you can do.
Well, 2 things.
No, I'll give you 3. I'll give you about 10, but let's start with number 1. And thank you, it's a good question. The first thing you can do, does anybody know how many calls it takes to your state legislator's office for them to hit the hot button?
Too many.
How many calls it takes? Too many?